Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creativity Worth Expressing podcast. This is my first episode of the podcast. I have a separate YouTube channel where I focus on introducing the audience to different guests, introducing the audience also to the projects of each guest. But for the podcast, my vision is to dive a bit deeper and have discussions on why creativity is not only worth expressing, but dive deeper and explore creativity. So for our first episode, I have special guest with me is Lorwen Nagle. Lorwen, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. That's great. Thank you, Ryan.
So this is my third time having you. I've had you on the podcast, The Truth That Heals. I've had you on the YouTube version of Creativity Worth Expressing. And now I have you for the third time on this podcast, this new podcast, Creativity Worth Expressing. Thank you so much for for your support and being here.
It's great. It's great.
So before we really dive into this episode, can you
Mhm.
share with the audience again just a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Let's see. So in my like mid 20s, is when I went into graduate school. I got my PhD. I also just before getting my PhD at UT Austin, I went over I had this longing to go to Tibet. And so my boyfriend and I took a trip to Tibet. I mean, actually into Nepal, and then we hiked into Tibet, trying to get to Lhasa. So that's part of my story because um, uh, had I got altitude sickness. We came back down, and ultimately, I met the Dalai Lama and went to work for him for 7 years following that. Um, and then I later in the 2000 early 2000s, I went back into a childhood love, which is painting. And first, it was plein air painting, which is outdoor landscape painting. And now it's acrylic contemporary pieces, which I would say are very psychological.
Okay,
So,
so thank you for sharing that about yourself. You've had
yeah.
quite the journey, and one of the reasons why I invited you on this new podcast is to help me and maybe even help the audience explore where does creativity and mental health connect. Can you help us in exploring that?
I hope so.
Yes.
So, uh, there are several ways in which creativity helps us grow as human beings. One thing that stands out for me when you ask the question is emotional regulation. So, people talk about emotional intelligence, and what that entails is being able to express yourself in a wide range of ways and not be limited to just sort of rote um, emotional responses like anger or frustration um, or anxiety, fear. Um, but to get to emotional intelligence, you you need to be able to um, access the default mode network of the brain. Now, and the default mode network has been speculated to be the imagination. So when we move into imaginative thinking, we're moving into creative thinking, and if we have the opportunity, let's say, we can get into artistic expression. And it might not be visual artists or art, but it could be musical, it could be dance, but all of these ways access the default mode network of the brain. And that network moves from the left to the right hemisphere. So it crosses the corpus callosum, which enables us to access more of our um, neurology, let's say, and not just be in literal or conceptual thinking.
Okay. I had a question on trauma because
Mm.
I feel that trauma and mental health can be very uh close together at times. Does it prevent people from being imaginative, or would you say does it prevent people from being creative? And if so, does becoming creative, does it help not only the mental health, but does becoming creative help perhaps heal the trauma?
I think it does. Without a doubt, I so in my work online, I have um, uh, I require that the people who work with me draw. And some people I have never drawn in their entire life, and they'll do a pen drawing. But what it does is it immediately takes the person out of this like literal brain, logical thinking, like what we're doing right now, even the dialectic that we're having right now, it takes you out of that and into the feeling state. And in trauma, that feeling state is it's I don't know how to say it. Uh, when we've been traumatized, especially as kids, and we're that's when I think the largest part of trauma occurs in uh, being a kid, young adulthood, and we kind of to overcome that, to be able to express yourself creatively, enables you to see more ways to view what happened. And the more you can see what happened in relation to how you are now, because you're not in a trauma state. The trauma is a memory. Then what happens is that you do begin to heal, I think. I think that there's your ability, the more that you can have a emotional bandwidth, the larger bandwidth, uh, the greater the healing. And that bandwidth gets accessed through creativity. We
And,
can access more ways to express ourselves in the creative domain.
and you mentioned earlier about one of the things that you start off with your clients is having them to draw.
Yeah.
Do you ever witness in some clients perhaps a stepping back and being maybe a fear of allowing themselves to be creative? Do you ever see that?
Hmm. Some resist. Now, when I say I'm not doing that with clients locally, this is online. So when you say, do they do they step back and resist, like in fear of
Mhm.
doing it? Yes, I say yes and no because some won't do it, and so I would say that is kind of goes along with what you're talking about. They refuse to do it because they refuse to engage in that creative domain, which is also what you point to it's a little bit reckless. It has a little bit of a, oh my God, I'm accessing or I'm falling off a cliff or I'm going into, something I've never done before and they don't want to do it. Yeah.
And for those who do take the chance to draw, what is it that you're trying to guide them towards? Like, what's the direction that you're trying to lead them towards?
Well, I do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's dealing with all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, labeling yourself like, oh, I'm no good, all these kinds of things. Um, and and that's in our thinking process. But when I have them draw, what they're doing is accessing um, feeling states. So for instance, a guy that I had just this past week um, drew for the first time, and he said, "It's my happy place." And I said, "Well, what?" And it was just done with pen and ink. I mean, just pen on a piece of paper. And he had drawn a house with a little. He explained that it was a pool on the side and all this. So that would have never. He said, I think this is the dream house I want for my family. So that would have never shown up in my conversation with him, his happy place, you know, but it shows up in his drawing. And he had never drawn in his life. And so he's written to me and said that he's drawing with his 4-year-old son. So
Oh.
he's so excited and he loves drawing now.
Something that I really found fascinating was that you said that he would never have brought that up in a conversational setting about this dream house, but when you prompted him to draw, this came out. Is drawing or being creative like poetry and allowing our minds to be an imaginative, is it like our subconscious is coming out? Is it like being in the dream state? Because going back to the conversational, that would have never come out about having a dream house. So I'm kind of wondering, what is it that maybe tricks the brain into putting the walls down a bit?
Well, one thing neurologically is that most creativity and drawing or um, you know with a tactile something that you're doing tactile like will access the right side of the brain, which is visual spatial. And um, and that has also been seen to different between the left being where our language sites are, and a lot of ways in which we logically make sense of the world. So you're crossing over into the visual spatial dimension of the brain, and that is also accessing kind of gestalt, big picture process. And there's even a guy, Ian McGilchrist, is Scottish psychiatrist who's written some fabulous books. One's called The Master and the Emissary. And that one is about the emissary has taken over the master's um, uh, kind of role. And the master is really, according to Ian McGilchrist, is the right side of the brain. It's the visual spatial, the big picture uh, kind part of our brain that doesn't get access with the digital and technological things that we do these days.
So going back to mental health and
Mhm.
creativity, we've already started on drawing. What are some exercises perhaps someone can do that can, let's say, if they have never allowed themselves to be creative or imaginative, what is a maybe a basic exercise that can help tap into this side of the brain that wants to be creative?
That's interesting. One of the things that just struck me when you asked the question is to create ink blots. So you can take and pour, you know, like colored, you know, just anything. Put a bit of water on it, and then fold the paper, and then pull it out again and look at it and say, what do you see in it? What shows up? I think that accesses that creative, imaginative part of ourselves to then look into the blot that you just made and say, wow, I see a spider, or I see, I see two people running, and maybe a pumpkin or something. Who knows? But um you're engaging in that imaginative network.
Well, I have never done that, but I think that's something that I'm planning on doing. But what I love about that is you're basically creating something. You don't know what the end result is going to be, but
Right.
you're also talking about stepping back and kind of analyzing it. Like really looking at
Yes.
what is it that you see, and your mind is, I don't know, maybe kind of making a story to this
Yeah.
ink blot. And I find that very, at least personally, as someone who loves creativity, I had to train myself. Like, for example, movies. I love
Mm.
movies, but I just consume them and that's it. Lately, I think after having especially conversations with you and other artists, I have really, it's really struck me that it's okay to watch films or look at art and step back and kind of reflect on how did they make me feel? How did I think? Or what is a character? And I think it's helped me to be more empathetic. Is there a connection there with admiring other people's arts and, let's say, how it affects one's character?
Yes. And also, uh, being more empathic is an antidote to anger and frustration. And it's not sympathy, and it's not support. People will be supportive of somebody else, but when they're empathic, when they can actually sense what is taking place, what the character was, how it made them, how it makes you feel inside, then you're starting to grow emotionally. It's it's healing. Empathy is as I say before, it's the antidote to anger and to uh frustration and hate. And we're in a society right now, at least in America, that is going through a lot of all or nothing thinking. People are all on one side or they're on the other side of the political spectrum. They're, you know, they hate those people, they like these people, and to be empathic is to take the road, is to begin to see the poetry
Mm.
in life, as opposed to taking a strong kind of, um, I think, narrow view of, oh, I like that person, oh, I don't like that person.
Yes, thank you. And I kind of wanted to now ask you another question going back. because you spent time in Tibet. That's correct? In Tibet, 7 years, correct?
Mm. No, I worked with it. I didn't stay 7 years in Tibet. That's actually Henry Harry. There's a guy
Oh,
who did stay seven
okay.
years in Tibet
I had the wrong
and wrote a
person.
book and wrote a book about it. No, I actually didn't stay there longer than 6 days, but because I got altitude sickness and this French expedition actually took me down along with my boyfriend
Mhm.
to the border of Nepal and
Oh,
Tibet.
okay.
So then I went to the Dalai Lama had been exiled from Tibet in 1959. So his residence was in India, and we went there, and it just so happened I got a chance to meet him personally and work for him. So that's what happened.
Okay.
I worked for 7 years with
But you had altitude sickness, correct?
I got yeah on
Uh,
the other side of Everest, Mount Everest.
So during this time, I mean, it's a different country, it's a
Yes.
different culture. Um,
Yeah.
do you think that the experience did it open some doors in your imagination? And if so, how were you able to transfer it from your imagination onto the canvas?
That's an interesting question because I think it does translate. But in my own artistic career, I have not seen a literal way in which my uh my being in Tibet and Nepal and India, I mean, I basically was over there seven. I flew, everything's a seven,
Yeah.
7 years, seven. I did, but literally, I traveled from America to India 7 times. So I don't know what the seven number is, but I do not see. Uh, well, some of my collages have actually Tibetans in it that I took photos of. So they're in the collage. So I would say some of these big pieces, this one up here, um, has Tibetan people in it. So yes, in fact, there is a literal a literal thing that's going on. I hadn't thought about that until now. Yeah.
Well, how is it for you when you have a concept in your mind, and how how important is it for mental health when you have the concept in your mind, but when you're able to
Mm.
translate it to your art project, whatever it may be, maybe it's music or writing, why is it so important to kind of get it out of the system?
Well, I think when you say concept, see, a lot of times what happens with painting and drawing, I'd say, um, you have this idea in your head. Like this guy says, my happy place, this my, so he draws it. And I imagine, although he would have to tell you, uh, I know for me, I have this thought about something and I put it down on the canvas, and then it doesn't show up exactly the way I thought it was going to. So so the canvas becomes you I think the best thing in painting and creativity is to begin to dialogue with your artistic expression. And that's part of the creative process is you are in a dialogue. So don't think of the like I'm drawing a tree or
Mhm.
I'm drawing, you know, a person. Instead, you draw something and then you begin to talk to it, talk with it. and say, what is it that you want? What do you want me to do to shift this? Or how would you like me to? And as soon as you begin this dialogue with your art work, I think you go deeper in your creative process.
I think that is so beautiful what you said about having a dialogue, because I don't want to say an artist, but because I'm doing this channel, I
Yeah.
have to explore creativity. So I have my guitar. I'm trying to relearn
Cool.
again, trying to I bought a sketchbook and I'm trying to do drawing, but there is because I'm at the bottom of skills, but I want to learn. I want to
Yeah.
tap into it. But there is this feeling of kind of like a feeling of failure because I see, for example, the circle. Okay, draw a circle. It's I see it, I have the concept in my mind, but it's not translating exactly as I would like on the sketchbook. It's not the same. And I was watching a YouTube video where this YouTuber was saying, don't commit right away. When you're doing the strokes for the circle, be gentle and kind of like what you're saying, he didn't say dialogue, but that's what that message of see where it goes and see where the art goes. And I really loved how you brought that. You relayed the message so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Um, but it also diminishes the critiquing. So I taught art and psychology with an artist who from Boston who's big league artist. Uh, and he and I would do these. It was during the pandemic. So we did these Zoom classes. And at the end, we'd always have a critique,
Mhm.
and everything was about critiquing the piece of work. Now, I'm okay with that for some professional artists, but even now, as I've evolved in my own artwork, I don't think it's a good idea to be too critical of your work, because you're accessing that part of yourself that is the judger,
Mhm.
the judgment, and it prevents you from exploring something that might show up in the dialogue if you weren't so critical. So,
So, uh, one question on as an artist, there is a desire to improve. As a podcaster, is a desire to improve. But at the same time, I don't want to be too critical. But what would you say is a healthy balance where I can, or any artist can, not overwhelm themselves by being judgmental, but what is the healthy way? Maybe inviting a friend to give advice, or I don't know. Sometimes online can be kind of mean in like in the online world. So, what is the healthy way to judge one's art, but not to be overwhelmed by it?
critical.
Yes,
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah. Um,
Or what advice would you
it,
give?
well, um, that's a tough one. Um, I'm married, and my husband is, he'll go, "Oh, I like that one. Oh, I don't like that one." So it's difficult to have people look at your work and then, because it's sort of raw, you're like putting your when you're in a creative process and you put something out there, um, and maybe it's in transition, you know, it's, I think it's, um, I don't know, you got me stumped on an answer on this one because a healthy balance might be to not to do your work. Um, like you say that you want to be a good podcaster. I think I think a healthy balance in, doing some creative endeavor like the podcast that you have started, um, is to see that you're kind of in line with other podcasts. Maybe you check out other, people that are kind of in the same niche, and stuff like that. But to not, don't like bring up your critic too strongly.
Mhm.
Check out things. I think that's another thing about artistic expression. Check out what's happening. Um, you're always improving. Have that open-minded, um, gentle quality to progressing in your artwork and in your creative endeavor.
Thank you. And now to wrap this up, I've already asked you this on the YouTube channel, but again, for you, why is creativity worth expressing?
Yeah. Wow. I think uh, it's it is the part of ourselves that I think holds some sacred aspects. And so, in a secular society, which is what I'd say, there's a lot of secularism and people, traditional religion is questioned and sometimes it just not done. This is a way that we access our spirit and our soul. However, you might want to say, it's it's a it's a sacred endeavor, I think, and um, in expressing it, you are expressing your humanness and your and also it's a mark. It's you're marking something that says, "Hey, I've been here. I'm here." You know, and that too is something that is transcends. It's a bit of transcending the material,
Wow,
and
that's deep.
and I think that's what creativity, expressing creatively is.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for being here, and thank you so much for being my very first guest
I love it.
on
I love it.
Creativity Worth Expressing podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. This is great.